Welcome to the Refugee Responses Mentor Training module focused on effective relationship building and engagement with youth. Let's get started. Part 1. Mentoring as Mutual Accompaniment. Accompaniment begins with stopping and noticing, crossing over the invisible lines that separate us, making time to connect, to understand, and to respond. It depends on learning about the experiences of people and listening for the kinds of assistance that are welcomed, if any. Pause the video and take a minute to reflect on this quote. What key descriptors does Mary Watkins use to describe accompaniment? What stands out to you? The refugee response encourages mentoring relationships that go beyond tutoring or teaching by creating ties of solidarity in our shared community. We emphasize that mentoring does not simply imply a teacher-student relationship in which the teacher imparts knowledge vertically from an expert position. A helpful way to think about a mentoring relationship is as a form of mutual accompaniment in which you and your mentee learn from one another. We think this nifty phrase captures some of the essence of mutual accompaniment. Strive to be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. What does mutual accompaniment actually look like in practice? When we accompany mentees, we engage in active listening and respect mentees' own forms of knowledge, experiences, and ways of seeing the world. We are mindful of social hierarchies, and we choose not to abuse the differences in power and privilege that may structure our relationships. We anticipate limitations and biases within the education system and attempt to overcome and undo these in mentoring sessions. We also take an active role in decolonizing our interpersonal relationships by becoming aware of how assumptions, ways of learning and teaching, and the types of institutions we participate in have been structured by colonialism and empire. Mindful mentors know that it takes time to grow into their role, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach to working with a student. One big aspect of the mentoring role is listening and observing, understanding how a student sees the world and sees themselves, what motivates them, and what goals they have for themselves are key to making your time together successful. As a mentor, you are on the other half of the equation. What are your motivations for volunteering? What are you hoping to accomplish or achieve through this experience? How do you see yourself and your role in this child's life? What is one thing you can do during a mentoring session to show that you and your mentee are both learners and teachers? Mutual accompaniment and decolonization go hand in hand. In Part 2, we'll explore some best practices to help guide you on your mentoring journey. But first, what does decolonization mean to the YMP? After thinking about all of that, let's take a moment to check in. How are you feeling right now? Identify at least one emoji that speaks to you in the moment. Thanks for enjoying a mindful moment with us. Now let's get back to decolonizing the mentor relationship. What are some tangible things we can do to realize our vision? One good place to start is with yourself. Recognize the aspects of your identity connected to power and privilege, and be mindful of the ways these aspects interact with your mentee's multiple identities and how they might influence your relationship. Use self-education as a way to better understand the varied journeys of your mentee. Remember not to burden your mentee with educating you on their background and experiences. This may be work that you will have to do on your own. We are happy to recommend resources for beginning mentors. Dismantle your negative and positive projections or stereotypes about your mentee. How might your intersecting identities influence your mentoring approach? Another way to decolonize the mentoring relationship is to approach mentoring with cultural sensitivity. Here are a few cultural sensitivity tips we hope will help you build mutual trust and respect with your mentee. Approach the student with curiosity about their unique life experiences and perspectives, and don't assume any particular group affiliations. In learning about each other, allow the student to set the boundaries of what they choose and are comfortable sharing with you. Nurture a safe space in which mentees can feel comfortable sharing and opening up on their own terms. Avoid framing the student purely through the lens of other, culture, or refugee. You and your mentee might have more cultural practices in common than you imagine, so make space for how the student views themselves, not just how you view them. Learn about microaggressions and how these play into everyday experiences for many minority groups. These are the kind of seemingly harmless statements that have a negative cumulative impact on those who hear them daily. No one's perfect, and there may come a time when you need to check yourself or say sorry. Think about the ways in which you might offer to repair any harm done and ask TRR for advice as needed. For more tips, check out pages 10 and 25 of your Mentor Resource Packet, and check out this resource on the Mentor Resource Portal. Language is an important component of cultural sensitivity. We recognize that words have power and encourage you to reflect on your speech patterns and use language with care. Language has the power not only to impact how your mentee feels about you, but also how you view the world yourself. Pay attention to the words you use to refer to the student you are working with, and be mindful of misrepresentations and dehumanizing terms. When you speak about your student, think about using the same words you would choose if your student was in the room with you. Make sure the language you use when addressing students does not reduce them to their refugee, ethnic, or cultural background. Remember that our identities are complex and perpetually shifting, and our language should allow for this as well. For example, students in the youth mentoring program may be from refugee backgrounds, but are no longer refugees. Learn to pronounce the student's name how she or he would like you to pronounce it, and speak casually with a normal tone of voice as though you were talking with a friend. Here's a fun thought exercise. Take a look at the phrases in column 1 and column 2. What's the difference? You might have noticed that column 1 implies a vertical relationship, while column 2 implies more of a mutual accompaniment model. What would it mean if you could say you did more things with your mentee than for your mentee? What kind of balance of with and for or to do you think is healthy for a mentoring relationship? Although mutually beneficial relationships will likely involve elements from both column 1 and column 2, especially when elements of column 1 are reciprocal, it is worth noting that you can use language to prime yourself to think and act in particular ways. In other words, the more you think about doing things with your mentee, the more you might actually do things with your mentee. Part 3. Webs of support. Remember, you are one meaningful node in the web of support. The diagram on this page is a reminder that a strong web of relationships needs to include strands from home, school, and community, made up of parents, siblings, grandparents, friends, teachers, mentors, coaches, and many others. Current research suggests that young people are most likely to flourish when they are embedded in a web of these relationships while also having at least 3 to 5 anchor relationships they know they can depend on at home, at school, and in other places they spend time. As you get to know your mentee better, take note of your mentee's anchor relationships and act in ways that recognize, respect, and support those relationships. Remember that it is not sustainable or desirable for one individual to occupy all support needs. At the same time, please notify the refugee response of any major gaps you notice in the web, and we can work creatively together and often with other anchors to come up with a solution. And now, to briefly recap, strive to be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. Work to decolonize your mentor relationship. Remember, you are one node in a web of support. Recognize, respect, and support other anchor relationships in your student's life and address challenges collaboratively as needed. With these topics in mind, can you think of one achievable action point or a reminder for yourself to help you along your mentoring journey? Think about a simple phrase that could prime your brain to act with equity in mind. For example, maybe you decide to write down, respect anchor relationships, or be a guide on the side. We encourage you to physically write this goal down and post it in a place you will notice before each mentoring session. It may seem silly, but if you are forced to see your equity prime each day, you really will become more aware of your implicit biases and therefore better prepared to recognize and address them when they occur in real life. Thank you for tuning in and happy mentoring!